So I know I kind of went on a walkabout in terms of comic events, and House of M kind of got shuffled off to the side. But we are back. Here is House of M, issue 6 of 8. And I remember when I first saw House of M, I didn't really know what was going on at the time, but I remember I enjoyed the covers. They're beautiful. That kind of painted feel about them just kind of gives it that nice, and the muted color palette. I don't know. It's just something that just draws the eye and makes it interesting. So if you guys want to know what's been going on in House of M without me having to go through everything all the way back to Avengers Disassembled, check out the readout and pause it, read it at your convenience. This is writer Brian Michael Bendis. Pencil is Olivier Coipel. Inkers Tim Townsend, Rick Magyar, and Scott Hanna. Colors is Frank Diamarta. Letter Chris Eliopoulos, and then everyone else working on the book. Now at this point, just some quick backstory in case no one has been keeping up or has never heard of this event. Wanda said no more mutants. Nope, we're not there yet. You didn't hear that. Wanda killed all the Avengers. And both the Avengers and the X-Men were trying to figure out what to do with her. She altered time. So in this universe, the mutants are the dominant species and the humans are what are starting to become the extinct race, for lack of a better word. And at this point, they found someone that, like Logan initially woke up and remembered his memories because it's Logan. But they met this little girl, cannot remember her name for the life of me, but she's been able to zap memories back into everyone that they've been in touch with. So Wolverine was part of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is like this sort of Her Majesty Imperial style thing in this universe. It says, Helicarriers, this is Special Agent Drew, broadcasting from the Quinjet, Red 5, requesting secured approach and landing. And we see at this point that Emma's doing everything that she can because she was one of the ones that they immediately brought back because they needed Scott and Emma, obviously, because at this point they're the leader of the X-Men. And they're just showing themselves invisible. Now, one thing, and this is what I'm going to kind of preface in this, y'all know what I'm trying to say. I haven't had enough coffee today. Hold on. Cheers. What I'm trying to say, preface, see, I just needed a sip. Bendis, early on, I enjoyed his writing. And, we all have had jokes and gags in the comments and on socials. But I noticed as time went on, his dialogue got wordier and wordier, and the action gets lesser and lesser. And it starts to show here because talking. And I know that with the House of M, they can't shove everything into the main event book. I get that. So they try to show little Easter eggs. So like any word on weapon XXXC. Let's see, who else is here? Latavia has no ambassador. He's lying. Natasha Romanoff is on line 56, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And just other than Easter eggs and fan service, there's nothing happening. And then we get to Genosha and this party that Magnus is hosting. Everyone's starting to show up. And this part is actually interesting. We see Magneto and his family coming to greet all the emissaries. The first one, of course, is Victor Von Doom. And I love how he's like, Magnus, Victor Von Doom, I was quite surprised to receive your RSVP. Do you think you were more or less surprised than I was to be invited? You'll stand for some photographs. It is why I'm here. So, of course, the uncomfortable delegate stuff going on. And then here. Just take a look at this page real quick, guys, and tell me what's wrong with it. Now, me and one of our fellow community members, Sam Gerthy, we both agree that we don't have a problem with wordy dialogue, as long as it pushes the story forward. So, for example, if you go back to old John Byrne, like Alpha Flight and Chris Claremont on Kenny X-Men, while the panels were moving, yes, there was dialogue, but there was like that third-party narration, which is desperately lacking in modern comics, that would get wordy, but it would progress the panels and you would get a sense of what's going on. And it felt, what's the word I'm looking for? Very literature, I guess. I can't think of a better word for it. But here, I know it's commissary food, but everyone should eat something. You'll need your strength. I ain't hungry, Scott. I'm pissed. We all are, Rogue. Hold it together. Hold it together. We'll be there soon enough. blah, 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 who cares? That could have been axed completely, but I know they're trying to set the stage. They could have used again, third party narration. They could have had like a little box that says commissary food, not for the faint of heart, but for our underdog heroes. They know that they have to keep their strength up. So while staying undetected, and while these third-party narration boxes are going, they can move the panels instead of. So you kind of understand what I'm getting at with that. But I will say one thing, Bendis with that, he does sometimes have moments of clarity, and you get some really heartfelt moments. So while that's happening, Luke Cage, in this universe, he is like the king of the underground in Hell's Kitchen. And he goes, listing, Jessica Jones. What city? Manhattan, I guess. One moment, I have one in Queens. Okay. And so he goes to call her. He gets a voicemail. This is Jessica, and this is Scott. Leave a message. Boop. And remember, Luke Cage and Jessica Drew are married. And I believe that they're supposed to have a kid at this point with New Avengers. And we just see the hurt in his face. Because up until, his memory was restored, he had no idea who Jessica Drew was. Now he does. And Spidey, did she pick up? Luke? I don't know why I just did that. I'm sorry. Did you try to get a hold of Mary Jane? And tell her what? Because now remember, he says Mary Jane. Why that matters is because in this universe, he, what's it called? He's married to Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy never died. He's living like his best life since he has a son and all that jazz. And he goes, and tell her what? It doesn't mean she'd be less successful if you were together. It doesn't. Except for the fact that we aren't together. She is. So that's a great little moment because both of them know who they love and how this world's supposed to be. And then the pep talk. And again, there's some really good emotional moments, but damn. I want to talk to you all for a second. I've been the leader of the X-Men since I was a teenager. That entire time, I've always prided myself on that tactical restraint, taking a moral high ground where violence is concerned. But today, and then this is where I liked it. There's no other way to say it. If we fail here, if we lose everything, which is true. Everything we've ever believed in, everything we've ever fought, every battle, it'll all have meant nothing. So I'm saying that whatever restraint or personal boundaries you usually put on yourself in the name of good or right, well, I think there's no place for any of that here in the fight we have in front of us. We can't lose this one. We have to win. Repeating himself. And to do that, all of you are going to have to fight without any restraint. Does anyone disagree? A lot of repetition there. And of course, Wolverine says, so what's the plan, Sparky? Now, we've kind of gone over how wordy dialogue can move the story along visually. Now, one thing I do want to point out, we just recently went over Red Hood Outlaw issue 28. And I was talking about how this story, there's a little bit of dialogue at the beginning, but as the story progresses, let me just bang my tripod. I apologize for that. It's just more like the panels, the story, visual storytelling, doing what comics are supposed to do. This is Scott Liddell, who carried the X-Men through the 90s and 2000s. And this was 2019. This was 2005, I think, and this is 2019. Scott Liddell still has it. Look how we are getting these beautiful, visual storytellings, and Liddell's holding back, just giving notes to the art team to move the story forward. And it's not until Batwoman comes on the scene that we get a couple of pages. And what I loved about this is he grabs a handful of Grundy guts. You should have driven through me when you had the chance, Batwoman. That was great. I still laughing about that. But again, half this book is just them fighting, and he's kind of making a couple of jokes to himself. Now, they could have added some dialogue if he wanted, or visual, like, how am I going to beat this guy? Where does he come from? Is this Solomon Grundy? They could have put, again, the third-person narration in his mind, just like he did here. I'm just saying. But here, as my history teacher in high school used to say, diary of the mouth. And it just keeps going. and going and going and going and fucking going. Look at this. Now, it's important what Drew's talking about here because Logan calls her on her BS, which I understand, but Jesus, look at this. She goes, let's think about this. Now, again, it's a good concept, but we're halfway through the book and we need more dialogue? Damn. Weren't we happier here? I think I was. Wasn't everybody? They gave us what we all wanted. And isn't there an argument that we deserve to get this, to be happy for once? I don't know. Maybe this was the time for this to happen. One day, Jess, you're going to be really embarrassed you said that out loud. Stop. Just listen. My point is, when something of this magnitude happens, you have to step back for a second and say, maybe this was time for this to happen. Who are we to decide how the world's supposed to be? When the meteors hit the Earth and destroy a species, it's natural selection, right? Like Kitty said, a meteor just hit the Earth. Maybe this is how mutants become the next dominant species. That's two things you're going to be embarrassed you said out loud. Translation, you don't know if I'm right or wrong, and it scares the crap out of you, and it should. Oh my God. So there's a show that I watch. It's no longer on air, unfortunately, but it was on G4. It's called Code Monkeys. And there's a character named Big T Larity, and he's kind of like, he owns this video game company, so he doesn't get all the lingo of the kids. And so like they'll say something and he'll be like, that's a mouth turd. And that has become one of my taglines, unfortunately. But it's apt here. That is a mouth turd, my friends. My God. And they could have like cut that down, because then we finally get to the gala. It's like the House of M is honored to have their guests. And so, we see, I think this is T'Challa. Yeah, that's T'Challa, Victor Von Doom. And while all this is happening, Cyclops is, and everyone's moving quietly through the crowd with their Emma's side probes in the way. And of course, lovely ads. And then to see Aurora, because she's oh crap, where is she from again? Not the Korean Empire. Where is Kenya? I was like, where is Aurora from? I know, but it's a nice little thing to kind of show all the different powers at this point. And then we finally see the full House of Magnus. And we see that Lorna is part of it in this world. And one thing that I find interesting is we've had some dialogue with Pietro, but we haven't had squat from Wanda. And I like how here, even though she's rebuild to a degree, she has not said nothing, and she's just very quiet in the background, very ominous, and I like that. And then look at this. Perfect. They could have said something along the lines, if they really wanted to add some dramatic impact, they could have said it starts as a silent squill in the sky or something, and as this ominous, what's the word that we could think of? I can't think of the word. An ominous sign gets closer and closer until all hell is about to break loose. But instead, Bendis cut the word balloons back and just let the panels speak for themselves. And we get that same impact. And then, Father, both Lorna and Magneto just, oh my God. See, we could have cut, not all of it, but they could have condensed this, at least 3 or 4 pages, because then at this point, finally, issue 6 out of 8, 6, the battle finally ensues. All the way to issue 8. Keep that in mind. It's taken 8 issues to get here, guys. And it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. And again, letting the art speak for itself, a great little part. Now, the ploy here, other than the fact that they got to take Magneto down and try to get the Scarlet Witch to revert everything, but in order to do that, they need the help from Charles Xavier. And so the girl, which I cannot remember her name again, Emma and Cloak, come to try to find where he's maybe held, and she goes, oh my God, oh no, what does this mean? What does it mean? Is it true? Because remember, we talked about his grave at the end of one of the issues, I don't remember what, But Cloak descends into the crypt. And there's a revelation, and he goes, it's not over yet. So that's what I'm saying is House of M, it was interesting. But again, and I've said this in a lot of modern comic reviews, the dialogue slows the pacing of the book down. Now, if you go back to like old school Batman comics, old school X-Men Avenger comics, even Alpha Flight, while the action is happening, if they need to have dialogue, they're either talking while they're battling, or they'll have those third party or the third person narration box explaining their mindsets. Like Snowbird knows that she needs to help Shaman and Vindicator, but she's so afraid of the beast within her. But she channels that inner demon and calls forth her powers. Stuff like that that would just poetically and narratively make you feel what that character is on the inside. And here we're not really feeling anything. You know, like when they had the dialogue here with Luke and Spidey, they could have cut this down. And after this, they could have said, as Luke hangs up, his heart drops. And then we kind of get that inner turmoil of Luke. And then they could have said, Parker, or however they wanted to call him here. They could have said, Peter feels his energy or something, knowing that he has the hardest choice to make along with him. He is a kindred soul. And then doing that, it moves the story. And they could even cut the dialogue. They could have just shown him, while they're doing those narration box, put his hand on his shoulder. They look at each other. And then he could have just said something like, it doesn't mean she'd be, just something. With just a little bit of dialogue. But that's just me, guys, and I'm an old Krabby Patty. What did y'all think so far of House of M? If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please first and foremost support your local comic shop or wherever you get your action figures and comics and pick up this series. And I promise we will finish this now. And if you've enjoyed this review / semi-rant, really would appreciate taking a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that fancy little Magnus bell next to subscribe, that was making simple content. You guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with you and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.